Nobody in the Galactic Coalition had ever seen a species cry over strangers. Admiral Cirrus Wen stood at the observation deck of Command Station Aurelius, watching the evacuation feeds from Meridian 7. Thousands of civilians ran toward transport ships while Coalition soldiers maintained perfect formation, their withdrawal executed with mathematical precision. The loss threshold had been reached. 3% casualties. Time to leave. On the screen, a Velian child stumbled and fell. The Coalition troops marched past without breaking stride. Their orders were clear. Maintain formation, proceed to extraction point, do not deviate. Cirrus felt her hands tighten into fists. High Commander Orath approached her from behind, his tall blue form reflecting the glow of multiple tactical displays. His people, the Velians, had led Coalition military doctrine for 6,000 years. They had perfected warfare into an exact science. The withdrawal proceeds within acceptable parameters, Orath said. His voice carried no emotion. Meridian 7 will fall within 16 hours. We have saved 82% of military assets. And the civilians still on the surface? Cirrus asked. Regrettable, but the transport capacity was calculated for maximum efficiency. Some must remain. Cirrus turned to face him. She had been assigned to Coalition Command as a human military advisor 3 months ago. In that time, she had watched 12 worlds fall to the devouring swarm. Each time, the pattern repeated. Fight until losses reach the threshold. Withdraw. Abandon whoever could not be efficiently evacuated. How many? She asked. Approximately 400,000. 400,000 people, left behind to be consumed by the swarm. This is why you are losing, Cirrus said quietly. Orath's expression did not change. The Velians were not known for emotional displays. We are conducting strategic withdrawal to preserve combat effectiveness. The mathematics are clear. Fighting beyond the threshold reduces overall war capacity. The swarm does not care about your mathematics. All warfare is mathematics. Cirrus shook her head. Across the chamber, other Coalition species monitored the evacuation. The crystalline prelate Miss Han coordinated logistics. The insectoid Kethra calculated ammunition expenditure. Everyone followed their roles. Everything proceeded according to doctrine. And the swarm kept winning. Lieutenant Dara Cole entered the observation deck, her boots loud against the polished floor. She was the only other human currently assigned to Aurelius, a combat veteran with 15 years of frontline experience. Her face was hard as she watched the evacuation feeds. Same as last time, she said to Cirrus. Same as every time. I know. That child on the feed, did you see? I saw. Dara's jaw tightened. Permission to speak freely, Admiral. Granted. This is not war, this is accounting. They count their losses like credits in a ledger. Acceptable losses, efficient withdrawals, strategic repositioning. She spat the words like poison. They have never fought for anything, not really. Cirrus did not disagree. The main display updated. Meridian 7 had fallen. The swarm's advance continued. 48 systems consumed in 8 months. The Coalition's precise warfare had failed to stop them even once. High Commander Orath called for the War Council to convene. Representatives from 30 species gathered in the central chamber, their forms ranging from humanoid to completely alien. Cirrus and Dara stood among them, the only humans present. Prelate Miss Han spoke first, her crystalline voice echoing through the chamber. The swarm adapts to our tactics within days. Our models cannot predict their movements. Standard doctrine is proving insufficient. Then we must refine the doctrine, another commander suggested. Increase the precision of our calculations. We have refined 17 times, Orath replied. The swarm adapts faster than we can adjust. The chamber fell silent. For 6,000 years, coalition warfare had proceeded according to established principles. Precise engagement, calculated losses, orderly withdrawal. No species had ever challenged these methods because no species had ever needed to. Until now. Cirrus stepped forward. Every eye in the chamber turned to her. "Let us show you another way," she said. Orath regarded her with what might have been curiosity. "Human warfare is considered primitive. Your species has only achieved interstellar travel within the last century. You lack the experience to contribute to strategic doctrine." "We lack experience in your kind of war," Cirrus agreed. "But we have fought our own kind of war for 10,000 years. We have fought when outnumbered. We have fought when outmatched. We have fought when every calculation said we should." "Surrender," she paused, "and we are still here." "What do you propose?" "Give us one world, one contested planet. Let human soldiers demonstrate what we can do." The council murmured. Several species expressed doubt. The mathematics were clear. Humans were new to the galactic stage. Their military was small. Their technology was average at best. But the swarm had taken 48 systems. Nothing else had worked. Orath considered for a long moment, then he nodded. "The planet Ardessa is currently under siege. We can reinforce with human troops. You will have your demonstration." Cirrus nodded. Beside her, Dara's eyes had gone cold and focused, the look of a soldier preparing for what must be done. "One more thing," Cirrus said. "When we fight, we do not withdraw at 3% losses. We do not leave civilians behind. If your observers cannot accept what they will see, do not send them." "What will we see?" Prelate Mishan asked. Cirrus looked at the display showing the swarm's advance. 48 worlds consumed, millions dead, a galaxy that thought it understood war. "Something you have never imagined," she said. "Something that will change everything you believe." The council approved the mission. The humans prepared to deploy. And the galaxy waited to learn what war really meant. The swarm had never heard screaming before. 200 human soldiers landed on Ardessa alongside 2,000 coalition troops. The planet was a mining colony, its surface covered in industrial complexes and worker settlements. 60,000 civilians huddled in shelters, waiting to see if they would be evacuated or abandoned. Sergeant Pavel Novik stepped off the transport and immediately started giving orders. He was a broad man with gray in his hair and scars on his hands. He had fought in 3 wars on Earth before humanity reached the stars. He knew what was coming. "Forget the defense line," he told his troops. "We are not holding a line, we are holding people." The coalition troops watched in confusion as the humans spread out through the settlement. Instead of taking defensive positions at optimal firing angles, they began reinforcing civilian shelters. They set traps in alleyways. They positioned themselves in buildings that offered no tactical advantage, but happened to stand between the swarm and the people hiding underground. Watcher Chris, a tall being with 4 eyes and silver skin, had been assigned to document the human methods. He followed Sergeant Novik with a recording device, his confusion growing by the minute. "Your positioning is inefficient," Chris observed. "You are sacrificing sight lines for proximity to non-combatants." "Correct," Novik said. "This contradicts basic tactical doctrine." "Correct. Then why do you do this?" Novik stopped walking. He looked at Chris with eyes that held no anger, only a deep and ancient understanding. "Because if we stand over there," he pointed to the optimal position, "we can kill more swarm, but if we stand here, we can save more people." He shrugged. "We would rather save people." Chris did not understand. He recorded the statement anyway. Dr. Yuki Tanaka established a medical station in the basement of a collapsed factory. She had served in combat zones for 9 years. She knew that proper medical facilities would not exist where they were going. "We will need more supplies," her assistant said. "We will make do with what we have. Coalition standard requires minimum equipment levels before engaging in field surgery." Yuki smiled grimly. "Coalition standard has never operated where we operate." Private First Class Amara Osai checked her weapon for the 4th time. She was 23 years old. This was her first major deployment. Her hands shook slightly, but she kept her face calm. An older soldier noticed and moved beside her. Scared, he asked. Yes. Good, fear keeps you sharp, he paused. Just do not let it make you run. Running is how you die. I will not run. I know you are human. The swarm arrived at sunset. They came in a wave of black and red, thousands of creatures pouring over the horizon. Each one stood taller than a man, with claws that could tear through steel and acid that melted armor. The coalition sensors had tracked their approach for hours, calculating numbers and trajectories. The coalition troops opened fire from their positions. Precise shots, controlled bursts, maximum efficiency. The humans waited. Chris watched Novik through his recording device. Your troops are not firing. The swarm approaches your position. I know. You must engage. Not yet. The swarm reached the outer buildings. Coalition troops began their tactical withdrawal as casualties approached the threshold. They moved in perfect formation, falling back toward the extraction point. The humans held their ground. When the first swarm creature reached Novik's position, he did something no alien had ever witnessed. He charged. 200 humans surged forward into the swarm, screaming battle cries that echoed off the industrial walls. They did not maintain formation. They did not calculate optimal engagement distance. They threw themselves into the mass of creatures with knives and fists and fury. Chris's recording device nearly fell from his hands. Amara fired until her weapon overheated, then used it as a club. A swarm creature slashed her side and she screamed, but she did not fall. She screamed louder and kept fighting. Dr. Tanaka dragged a wounded soldier behind cover while swarm acid burned holes in the ground beside her. She stabilized him in 30 seconds and moved to the next casualty. Novik took a claw through his shoulder. He grabbed the creature's limb, held it in place, and shot it through the head at point-blank range. Then he pulled free and kept fighting. The swarm had fought 100 species across 1,000 worlds. Every species followed the same pattern: take casualties, calculate losses, retreat when the numbers demanded it. Humans did not retreat. The creatures hesitated. For one impossible moment, the swarm stopped advancing. They had no pattern for this, no adaptation for enemies who bled and screamed and died but refused to stop. Coalition troops watching from the extraction zone stood frozen. They had never seen anything like this. They had never imagined anything like this. The first wave broke. The swarm fell back, leaving hundreds of their dead behind. Novik stood among the bodies, his uniform soaked with blood both human and alien. 17 of his soldiers were dead. 43 were wounded, but the civilians remained safe in their shelters. Chris approached him slowly. His 4 eyes were wide with something that might have been horror or might have been wonder. This is insane, he said. Novik wiped blood from his face. Yes. How can you fight like this? How can you take such losses? Novik looked back at the settlement. Somewhere beneath those buildings, 60,000 people waited, alive because humans had stood between them and death. That was just the first wave, he said quietly. The real war has not started yet. Behind them, the horizon grew dark again. The swarm was regrouping. And the humans began preparing for round 2. By the 3rd day, the coalition commanders decided Ardessa was lost. High Commander Orath transmitted the withdrawal order from orbit. The mathematics were undeniable. The swarm had sent 5 times their initial force. Losses had exceeded every acceptable threshold. Standard doctrine demanded immediate evacuation of military assets. Lieutenant Dara Cole received the order on her communicator. She read it twice. Then she switched to an open broadcast channel that reached every soldier on the planet, coalition and human alike. This is Lieutenant Cole to all coalition forces. I am aware of the withdrawal order. I am choosing to ignore it. Static filled the channel. Then Orath's voice came through, sharp with disapproval. Lieutenant, you are in violation of direct command. All forces must withdraw to preserve combat effectiveness. Negative, High Commander. 60,000 civilians remain in the shelters below us. They cannot be evacuated in time. If we leave, they die. The civilian calculation has been factored into the withdrawal decision. Their loss is regrettable but acceptable within strategic parameters. Cole looked across the battlefield. Human soldiers were fortifying positions, treating wounded, preparing for the next assault. None of them had moved toward the extraction zone. High Commander, I need you to understand something. There is no such thing as acceptable civilian loss. Not to us, not ever. This is not your decision to make. You are right, it is not a decision at all. It is who we are. She closed the channel. Sergeant Novak approached her position, his shoulder wrapped in bloody bandages. He had refused evacuation to the medical station. He would not leave his soldiers. Coalition pulling out, he asked. They want to. And us. Cole looked at the horizon where the swarm was gathering. Thousands upon thousands of creatures, more than she could count. They had 3 days of ammunition left, maybe 4 if they rationed carefully. We stay, she said. Novak nodded. He had expected nothing different. Across the settlement, human soldiers continued their work. Private Amara Osai had lost her left arm in the second assault. The acid had eaten through flesh and bone before Dr. Tanaka could neutralize it. Now Amara sat against a wall, her stump cauterized and wrapped, her remaining hand holding her rifle. A coalition medic approached her, his insected face showing what might have been concern. You require evacuation, he said. Your combat effectiveness is reduced by 60%. Amara looked up at him. Her face was pale from blood loss, but her eyes were clear. I can still shoot, she said. I can still fight. This is not logical. You are severely wounded. There are children in those shelters. Do you think they care about my combat effectiveness percentage? The medic had no response. He had never encountered a wounded soldier who refused treatment in favor of continued combat. In coalition doctrine, injured personnel were assets to be preserved or written off. The concept of fighting through injury did not exist in their calculations. Dr. Tanaka moved through the wounded like a ghost, her hands never stopping. She had performed 14 surgeries in the past 20 hours. Coalition medical standards said she should have stopped at 3. Coalition standards did not account for patients who would die without her. Tanaka, you need rest, another human called out. Rest when we win or rest when we die, she replied without looking up. Those are the options. The sun set on the 3rd day. The swarm began its assault at midnight. They came from all directions this time, surrounding the settlement in a ring of claws and hunger. Human soldiers took positions at every entrance, every gap, every possible approach. They had learned the terrain over 3 days of fighting. They knew where to stand. They knew where to die. Novak initiated the defense with a simple order. Make them pay for every step. The night became a symphony of gunfire and screaming. Humans fought in the darkness with flashlights mounted on their weapons, illuminating targets for brief seconds before pulling the trigger. The swarm pushed forward, and humans pushed back. Cole found herself back to back with a coalition soldier who had refused to evacuate. His name was Terrace, a young Velian who had never seen ground combat before today. Why did you stay? She asked between shots. Terrace fumbled with his weapon, his hands shaking. I watched you fight yesterday. I watched you bleed for people you do not know. I could not leave and still call myself a soldier. You might die here. Then I will die knowing I tried. Cole smiled grimly. Perhaps the galaxy could learn after all. The night stretched on forever. Ammunition ran low. Soldiers fought with knives, with rocks, with their hands. The swarm pressed closer to the civilian shelters. Then, as dawn broke, something changed. The swarm pulled back. Not a tactical retreat, not a repositioning. They simply stopped and withdrew, leaving their dead behind them. Novik stood in the morning light, surrounded by exhausted soldiers and piles of enemy corpses. He did not understand. The swarm had them outnumbered. Victory was within their reach. Why had they stopped? A transmission came from orbit, Orath's voice quieter than before. Sergeant Novik, we have detected unusual swarm movement. They are redirecting forces from 3 other systems to your location. Reinforcements. It appears so. They are sending everything they have. Novik looked at his soldiers, wounded, exhausted, running low on supplies. They had held for 3 days against impossible odds. Now the real test was coming. How long until they arrive? He asked. Approximately 48 hours. Novik closed his eyes. 48 hours, 2 more days of hell. We will be here, he said. And behind him, every human soldier nodded in agreement. The recordings from Ardessa spread through the coalition like fire through dry grass. On Command Station Aurelius, Admiral Cirrus Wen stood before the full War Council as footage played across every screen. 30 species watched in silence as humans charged into swarm formations. They watched soldiers fight with missing limbs. They watched medics operate while acid burned around them. Grand Arbiter Solène, leader of the Coalition Council, spoke first. Her voice was ancient and carried the weight of centuries. This is not warfare, this is madness. No, Cirrus replied. This is what warfare looks like when surrender is not an option. Prelate Miss Han leaned forward, her crystalline form catching the light. How do you produce soldiers willing to die like this? What conditioning do you use? What programming? None. That is impossible. Beings do not sacrifice themselves without compulsion. Cirrus walked to the center of the chamber. Every eye followed her. Let me show you something, she said. The screens changed. New images appeared, pulled from human historical archives. Alien counselors saw trenches stretching across muddy fields, soldiers climbing over the top into certain death. They saw beaches covered with bodies while more soldiers kept coming, wave after wave. They saw frozen mountains where men, wrapped in thin blankets, fought against impossible numbers. These images are from our homeworld, Cirrus explained. The first one is from a war that killed 17 million of our people. The second is from a war that killed 70 million. The third is from a war we fought in frozen hell for 3 years because we believed the cause was right. Silence filled the chamber. Humans have been fighting total wars since before we discovered metal, Cirrus continued. We have fought against ourselves, against nature, against extinction. We learned something that your species never needed to learn. Some things matter more than survival. Captain Kenji Mori entered the chamber. He was a naval tactician who had been summoned from the human fleet to consult with coalition leadership. He carried a data pad filled with human military history. You want to understand why we fight like this, he said. I will tell you. He activated the data pad. More images appeared. A single soldier standing against tanks. A pilot crashing his damaged plane into an enemy ship. A mother shielding her child with her own body. On Earth, we have a concept that does not translate well into your languages. We call it honor. But that is not quite right. It is more than honor. It is the belief that how you live matters more than how long you live. Grand Arbiter Solène shook her head slowly. This is inefficient. Your species wastes resources on sentiment. Perhaps, Kenji agreed, but the swarm has taken 48 of your worlds using efficient tactics. They have taken none of ours. The council had no response. Meanwhile, on Ardessa, the soldiers waited for the coming storm. Sergeant Novik gathered his troops in the central square. Coalition reinforcements had arrived, ships bringing supplies and fresh soldiers. But only 1,200 coalition troops had volunteered to stay and fight alongside the humans. The rest remained in orbit, following standard doctrine. 1,200 aliens, 143 humans still capable of fighting. Against an army of tens of thousands. Novik looked at the mixed force before him. Humans stood beside Velians, insectoids, crystalline beings. They had fought together for 3 days. They had bled together. Some had died together. "I am not going to lie to you," Novik said. "What is coming will be worse than anything we have faced. The swarm is sending everything they have. They want to destroy us as an example to others." The soldiers listened without speaking. "Coalition doctrine says we should retreat. The mathematics say we cannot win. Every calculation says we should leave." He paused. "But mathematics never won a war. Calculations never saved a child. Numbers on a screen never held the line when everything said to run." He looked at the alien soldiers who had chosen to stay. "Some of you are here because you believe in our cause. Some of you are here because you could not live with leaving. Some of you do not know why you are here." He smiled grimly. "It does not matter. What matters is that you stayed. What matters is that when this is over, 60,000 people will know that soldiers stood between them and death." Lieutenant Cole stepped forward. "The evacuation transports are leaving in 6 hours. Anyone who wants to go can go. No shame, no judgment. This is not your fight." Not one soldier moved. Terrace, the young Velian who had stayed to fight, spoke up. "You asked me why I stayed, Lieutenant. I did not have a good answer then. I do now." "What is it?" "Because for 6,000 years we have called ourselves warriors, but we never knew what that word meant. You showed us." Around the square, coalition soldiers nodded. They had watched humans fight impossible battles for 3 days. They had seen sacrifice they could not explain. Something had changed inside them. The sun began to set over Ardessa. In the distance, dust clouds rose from the horizon. The swarm was coming. Novik checked his weapon one last time. "Everyone to positions, this is it." As soldiers moved to their stations, a new transmission came from orbit. High Commander Orath's voice filled the channel. "Sergeant Novik, I am watching from above. What you are doing defies everything I have been taught. It contradicts all known military theory." "I know. If you survive this, I want to understand why." Novik looked at the approaching storm. Thousands of swarm creatures, more than he could count, coming to destroy everything they had defended. "If I survive," he said, "I will explain. If I do not watch the recordings, the answer is there." He closed the channel and raised his weapon. The final battle had begun. 72 hours of continuous combat broke something in the swarm. The assault began at dusk and did not stop. Wave after wave crashed against human and coalition positions. Like ocean tides against rock, soldiers rotated in shifts, fighting until they collapsed, sleeping for minutes at a time, then returning to the line. Amara Osai stood at her post with one arm, her rifle braced against a broken wall. She had not slept in 40 hours. Her remaining hand moved automatically, aiming, firing, reloading. A coalition soldier beside her fell, and she stepped into the gap without thinking. Dr. Tanaka had stopped counting surgeries. Her medical station was now 3 floors of a collapsed building, filled with wounded from both species. She operated on a human with shrapnel wounds while swarm acid dripped through cracks in the ceiling above her. "Doctor, you must evacuate this location," a coalition medic said. "The structural integrity is failing." "Move the patients first." "There is no time. The ceiling will collapse within minutes." Tanaka looked at the operating table. The soldier under her hands was 19 years old. He had a family back on Earth. "Then I have minutes to finish," she said. She completed the surgery as the ceiling groaned above her. Coalition medics carried patients out one by one. When the last wounded soldier was moved, Tanaka walked out seconds before the building fell behind her. She did not stop to rest. There were more wounded waiting. Sergeant Novik had taken so many injuries that coalition medical scanners declared him dead twice. Both times, he stood up and returned to fighting. His body ran on something beyond physical capability, something the aliens had no word for. "You should not be alive," Watcher Christ said, still recording despite the chaos around him. "Probably not," Novik agreed. He fired 3 shots into an approaching swarm creature and kept moving. How your wounds are fatal by every medical standard. Your standards measure the body, they do not measure the will. Chris added this to his recordings. He did not understand, but he suspected the galaxy would need to. On the second night, Admiral Wen detected something on orbital scans. A command unit larger than the others directing the swarm assault from behind the lines. Kill it, and the attack might falter. She transmitted to Lieutenant Cole on the ground. We have identified a priority target. Swarm command unit coordinates 3 kilometers northeast of your position. Cole looked at the map. 3 kilometers through swarm-held territory, it would require someone to get close enough to mark the target for orbital strike. I need a volunteer for a one-way mission, she broadcast to her remaining soldiers. Every human raised their hand. Cole chose herself. She moved through the ruined settlement like a shadow, avoiding swarm patrols and crawling through collapsed tunnels. Her communication equipment included a targeting beacon that would guide the orbital strike. Once activated, she would have approximately 30 seconds before impact. 30 seconds was not enough time to escape. She reached the command unit at dawn. It was massive, a creature the size of a building, surrounded by thousands of swarm soldiers. Her beacon would mark it for destruction. She would mark herself as well. Cole activated her communicator one last time. This is Lieutenant Dara Cole. Target acquired. I am activating the beacon. Novik's voice came through, rough with exhaustion. Cole, there has to be another way. There is not, and even if there was, I would still do this. She paused. Tell them what we are, tell them why we fight. That is my last order. She pressed the button. 30 seconds. She counted them in her head while swarm creatures turned toward her position. 20 seconds. They began moving in her direction, acid dripping from their claws. 10 seconds. She raised her weapon and fired not to survive, but to hold them back one moment longer. 5 seconds. For the kids in those shelters, she whispered. The orbital strike hit like the fist of God. Light erased everything. The command unit, the surrounding swarm, and Lieutenant Dara Cole vanished in a pillar of fire visible from orbit. Across the battlefield, the swarm stopped moving. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the creatures began to retreat. Without their command unit, they had no coordination. They attacked randomly, individually, easily picked off by the exhausted defenders. By noon, the swarm was gone. Novik stood in the center of the settlement, surrounded by bodies and rubble. Of the 200 humans who had landed on Ardessa, 47 remained alive. Of the 1,200 coalition troops who had stayed, 600 had survived. 60,000 civilians emerged from their shelters. They looked at the soldiers who had defended them for 5 days against impossible odds. They looked at the bodies of those who had not survived. Human children stared at alien. Soldiers who had chosen to stand beside their strange, mad allies. A Velian woman approached Novik. She held a small child in her arms. You stayed, she said. You could have left, you stayed. Novik nodded. He could not speak. Exhaustion had taken everything but the ability to stand. Why, she asked. He thought of Cole, who had given everything. He thought of his soldiers who had fought beyond human limits. He thought of the coalition troops who had learned something they never knew they needed to learn. Because that is what we do, he finally said. That is who we are. Above them, coalition ships descended through clouds of smoke. The war was not over, but something fundamental had changed. And Lieutenant Cole's last order echoed through the galaxy. Tell them what we are, tell them why we fight. 3 months after Ardessa, the galaxy gathered to remember. The coalition capital world had never seen a ceremony like this. Representatives from every member species filled the grand memorial hall, their forms creating a tapestry of shapes and colors. Screens displayed images from Ardessa, from the battles that had changed everything. At the center of the hall stood the survivors. Sergeant Pavel Novik sat in a wheelchair, his body finally acknowledging the damage it had ignored during combat. Doctors said he would walk again eventually. He did not care about eventually. He cared about today. Private Amara Osai stood beside him, her prosthetic arm gleaming under the ceremonial lights. She had refused to hide it. The arm was not a mark of loss. It was proof of what she had given. Dr. Yuki Tanaka wore new scars across her face, souvenirs from the ceiling collapse she had barely escaped. She had saved 43 lives during the siege. She still thought about the ones she could not save. And behind them stood the coalition soldiers who had chosen to stay. Terrace the Velian, Christ the Watcher, 600 beings who had learned something about themselves they had never known. Grand Arbiter Solen rose to address the assembly. Her voice echoed through the vast chamber. For 6,000 years, the coalition has conducted warfare according to established doctrine. We measured losses. We calculated acceptable thresholds. We withdrew when mathematics demanded it. She paused. We thought we understood war. The screens showed footage from Ardessa, humans charging into swarm formations, soldiers, fighting through wounds that should have killed them, a young woman with one arm refusing to leave her post. We were wrong, Solen continued. We understood efficiency, we understood calculation, but we did not understand what it means to fight for something beyond survival. She turned to face the human survivors. The humans showed us that war is not about winning. It is about what you are willing to lose. It is about standing in the darkness when every rational thought tells you to run. It is about choosing to suffer so that others do not have to. High Commander Orath stepped forward. 3 months ago, he had ordered the withdrawal from Ardessa. He had called human methods primitive and inefficient. Now he carried a different understanding. I have watched the recordings from Ardessa 117 times, he said. I have studied every moment. I still cannot fully explain what I witnessed. But I know this, the swarm is not retreating because we outfought them. They are retreating because we outbelieved them. The war had turned in the months since Ardessa. Coalition forces, trained by human instructors, had begun fighting differently, not with reckless abandon but with purpose. They held positions longer. They protected civilians more fiercely. They learned that calculations alone could not capture what made soldiers truly dangerous. The swarm, for the first time in their existence, had encountered something they could not adapt to. They could adjust to tactics. They could counter strategies, but they could not comprehend an enemy that simply refused to stop. Watcher Christ approached a podium. His recordings from Ardessa had become required viewing for every coalition soldier. He had spent 3 months trying to understand what he had witnessed. I came to Ardessa to document human military methods, he said. I thought I would record tactics, strategies, technical approaches. He shook his head slowly. Instead, I recorded something I have no word for. The closest translation in my language might be spirit, but that is not quite right either. He looked at the human survivors. Humans do not fight because they believe they will win. They fight because they believe they should. The outcome does not matter. The calculation does not matter. What matters is the choice to stand. The ceremony continued with honors given to the fallen. Lieutenant Dara Cole received the highest recognition the coalition could offer, awarded posthumously. Her name was added to monuments across 100 worlds. As the ceremony ended, a new class of soldiers gathered in a training facility on the capital world. They came from 30 different species, united by what they had witnessed on Ardessa. Their instructors stood before them, human veterans who had survived 5 days of hell. You have seen the recordings, the lead instructor said. You know what happened on Ardessa, but recordings cannot teach you what we learned. She looked at the assembled beings, so different from each other, yet all seeking the same understanding. We cannot teach you how to fight like us. Your bodies are different. Your instincts are different. But we can teach you why we fight, and that is more important than any technique. A young Velian raised a hand. How do we learn that? The instructor smiled. You learn it when you find something worth fighting for, when you find something you would die to protect, when you realize that some things matter more than your own survival. Outside the training facility, Novik sat alone, watching the sun set on an alien world. Tanaka found him there and sat beside him. "Still thinking about Ardessa?" she asked. "Always. About Cole. About all of them, the ones who did not come back." Tanaka nodded. "We won, the swarm is retreating, the coalition is learning, everything we sacrificed mattered." Novik watched the sky turn golden. Somewhere out there, the war continued. Somewhere out there, coalition soldiers were learning to fight with human spirit. "Cole told me to tell them what we are," he said quietly. "Tell them why we fight. I have been trying to figure out how to explain it." "Did you find an answer?" He thought for a long moment, then he nodded slowly. "We fight because we know what it is to lose. We have lost everything over and over throughout our history. We have been broken and destroyed and rebuilt, and every time we learn the same lesson." "What lesson?" Novik looked at her with eyes that held 10,000 years of human struggle. "That the only thing worse than dying for something is living with the knowledge that you could have helped and did not." Above them, stars began appearing in the darkening sky. A new era had begun. The coalition had learned something they could never unlearn. And across the galaxy, they finally understood what war really meant.